Welcome to the Fourth Row Podcast, your exclusive source for 2A basketball. And now, your hosts, coming to you from the Slim 4 studio, Andy and Benny Hill.
Welcome to the Fourth Row Podcast, the only podcast dedicated solely to 2A basketball here in the snowy state of Utah. I'm your host, Andy Hill. I'm here with the coach, Benny Hill, in the Slim 4 studio, sponsored by Security National. You going to pop up?
Yes, it's up right now. Bingo.
We'd like to thank our good friend Chris Jorgensen in the E10 office for once again being our title sponsor. Chris has been so good. I was thinking about the other day, a year ago when we started the podcast, we had done nothing. And I called Chris and I said, hey, you want to be our sponsor? We had done nothing. He's like, absolutely, we will. So, and he's been on board. We appreciate him. He's done a couple mortgages for me. I know he's done some for Benny. He's helped a lot of people out. So for any of your mortgage needs, give Chris a call, 283-3000, as he says, turning houses into homes. A couple announcements about the Fourth Row Podcast. This is my favorite one. The Fourth Row Podcast is still the number one 2A basketball podcast in the state of Utah. 40 weeks running. We may be the only one, but we're still the number one. The audio version of the podcast will release each Monday, with the YouTube version releasing later on in the week. Make sure you follow us on all of our social media channels at Fourth Row Media. Benny, what do we got going on tonight?
We have the man with the golden pipes here tonight.
Yeah.
I wish I had golden pipes.
Yeah. I think people will certainly recognize his voice for sure.
They don't have to see the YouTube video to know who we got in tonight. We have our good friend Robert Lovell.
Yeah, the voice of Mid-Utah Radio.
So we're going to pick his brain a little bit tonight on his experience in covering athletics in Utah, Central Utah. So now, I mean, you cover a lot of the state. So a large portion of the state, he is the eyes and ears of what's going on in rural Utah in football, basketball, baseball. So
and wrestling. I saw you did a wrestling.
Yeah, it was great duel last week.
I'm interested. I want to talk to you about wrestling. That'll be fun.
And by the way, a correction, it's not snowy, it's rainy outside.
That's true. It's been snowy, rainy.
Yeah, so
it depends on the hour anymore.
That's right.
It's been a good week of basketball.
It's been a lot of fun.
Where you been this week, Robert?
I also got to do South Sevier Enterprise on Tuesday, the 1 versus 2 matchup in that one, and then on Wednesday I did North Sevier Millard in that game. So
was that in Millard or North Sevier?
Yeah, it was in Millard.
In Millard.
Yeah.
So they had 2 back-to-back homers. Okay.
Yep.
Cool.
So those are the 2 guys. Then you got to go to Millard 2 days later.
Yes. So we were at Millard's. I tell you my experience this week, Robert. You were gracious enough to give me a gig in Gunnison with Rhett. It was Gunnison North Summit on Wednesday night, and just prior to the game, Gunnison decided. Well, I think they decided previous to that they wanted to spice up their pregame festivities. Well, Rhett informed me that he was part of that. So just about
so he
a few
just
minutes,
threw you into the pregame
before, he's like, "Hey,
show
take care of it." I'm like, Yeah, it was kind of. I was not good in my pregame presentation because I didn't have time. I didn't have time to prep my pregame presentation. But I will tell you, it was a pleasure to work with Dennis Aldridge in Millard.
Oh, he's so fun to work with.
It was. I'd never met him before. I have met him before. In fact, he barked at me a few times when I was coaching. I don't think he knew who I was, but I was kind of in his way during a JV game, and he barked at me a few times. But it was an absolute privilege to work with him.
Yeah, he's a lot of fun to work with. Does a great job.
It was really easy. Everything flowed really good. It was a lot of fun. So I had a good time over Millard. So thank you for those opportunities. It is a lot of fun. It's a lot different than what you'd think. For me, podcasting is easy because you have a conversation with a face-to-face. But in that game, the North Summit game, the pregame, when Rhett was gone, I'm like, who do I talk to? It's like it was this weird conversation I was trying to connect with the audience. But so you guys that do it and do it well, I have hats off to you because it's definitely a different thing talking to the air or talking to. So Anyway, that was my week. I saw the Gunnison North Summit game and Gunnison Millard on Friday night.
And the great thing is too, I think at least for me. So Tuesday night we went out to Monroe and watched that game. Wednesday night, we're home against North Summit. Thursday night, thanks to Centricom and TeamHive.live, I picked up the Parowan-Kanab game. Friday night, I was splitting between the Enterprise San Juan game and the Gunnison game. And then on Saturday, picked up a couple other games with the Enterprise Grand game and then the San Juan South Sevier game. Yeah. So that's the great thing about with all the broadcasting and everything that's out there. You can pretty much watch about any game right now that's available.
I tell people all the time, with what Mid-Utah Radio has done for 40 years or whatever on the radio side, and then being able to partner with Centricom and Centricom transforming that into more of a statewide thing with TeamHive.live, there's no classification, maybe in the whole country, then that gets the coverage that we get here in central and south central Utah with kind of 3A down for those schools in this area. The coverage is phenomenal, and the guys that do it, especially because there's I get a lot of the credit, like that I'm the guy there and doing the games, but really it's the guys back in the studio that make it work. Barrett Hilton and Nate Palmer at Centricom that do so much prep to get things going, and then obviously you talk about Security National Mortgage. They've been a sports sponsor for a lot of years, and the sponsors ultimately that make it possible for us to go do those games. It's a lot of fun, and it's great to do, but there's a lot of people and businesses that make it work and make it happen to be able to bring the kind of coverage that we get to enjoy here in this area.
Yeah, we're very lucky to do that for sure.
There's a few. Just an eye opener for me was the assignments that I've got so far. One particular one was up in Altamont. So you got, and people might not realize this, that there's a group that shows up beforehand that's got to go deal with logistics there with Wi-Fi and power.
And Barrett was doing that game, and it wasn't the most ideal setup.
No, it was
It was
not.
a great setup once they got going, but it took some work to get going.
What's interesting is my son-in-law was there. He lives up in Duchesne now. Well, his brother-in-law happened to be the IT guy in the district. So we couldn't, Barrett couldn't get in. And so he's like, oh, let me call my uncle. And so they get in. But there's a lot of background work that has to be navigated beforehand. There's a lot of background work you have to do to get guys out and covering everything. So hats off to your operation for such an amazing job of covering all this stuff and make it so convenient to watch.
Yeah, well, thank you. And again, there's a lot of people that make it possible to do it, and so we're just blessed to be in this area and get this kind of coverage.
Yeah,
How did you get started, Rob? Where'd you go to school?
I went to college at Dixie. It was still Dixie, right? So
where'd
Dixie
you go to
State.
high school?
I went to Delta. So
You're a Delta Rabbit, huh?
Yep. So, and it was a strange thing when people told me when I was 16, 17 that a rabbit was a weak mascot. Like it never even crossed my mind, right? That a rabbit could be considered weak, because I see the big, the muscly rabbit, and my foster brother actually drew that rabbit.
Really?
Back when the church did, I think they called it the Lamanite program, and so he's from the Navajo reservation, Guilford, and he's 15 years older than me, but he actually drew that rabbit for the yearbook, and it's
Still
stuck.
there, yeah.
And so for me, I could never even think about it being I could never even cross my mind. And then I'm up at the Rick Majerus basketball camp one summer, and people are like, "Oh, that's a terrible mascot." I'm like, "No, that's an awesome mascot."
Well, speaking of that, we were over at the Palladium yesterday watching drill team, and I think the wrestling state championship banners go halfway around the gym.
Right.
I think there's 20 plus.
So there's 34.
34. Okay. So there was a lot.
Yeah.
So very impressive. You look up in the rafters and you can generally see what schools, and it's just wrestling and wrestling. So
yeah, I remember I did a South Severe Millard basketball game. I think it was my first year here, and coming back here doing this, and Dustin Shakespeare was still the South Severe coach. So it was my first year here. It was his year coaching, and the game got moved from Wednesday to Tuesday, and he couldn't figure out why on earth that game would have been on a Tuesday, and it was because, the Delta Millard wrestling duel was the next night. So it trumped the basketball game, and for most areas in the state, that would not be the case, but
gotcha.
The Delta Millard duel would do that.
So from there, you go to Dixie?
Yeah, went to Dixie State and was working through school there and working on becoming a physical therapist. My wife likes to say that she married a physical therapist and ended up with a radio guy. So, so I was a month away from really applying to physical therapy school, and I came home and told her, I said, I don't want to do this. so she was luckily gracious enough to let me say that I wanted to do sports radio and go from there.
Did you have something that spurred that? Get some contacts, or just had a
sports is obviously, I love sports, and I grew up playing. I played football, basketball, and baseball for Delta, and loved that aspect of it. It's been big in my family forever, and I had two brothers that wrestled, so two of us played basketball, two wrestled, and so we've got kind of both sides of the coin there. But I remember in 7th grade, I told my dad, I said, if I'm not a big league baseball player, I want to do sports broadcasting. And so that was, something that was there in the back of my mind. It was always in the back of my mind, but it's a lot safer to go the healthcare route, right?
Oh, yeah.
But it nagged at me enough that I decided one day that, nope, I want to do this and see where it goes.
So then, okay, you have the idea to be a sports broadcaster. How do you get into being a sports broadcaster?
That was harder. I hurried and changed my major, and I went through just a communications degree as fast as I could possibly go through it. The fastest one was actually through TV, doing a broadcast journalism TV degree. I didn't love doing TV. I got to broadcast TV games and do sports anchor type of things through the college TV station and do some of that. I didn't love the TV side of it, but I got to do some radio too, and I contacted Devin Dixon at the time down at Cherry Creek Radio in St. George, and he was nice enough to give me a shot at it and had me come on. And so I co-hosted his show with him for about a year, and got to do some games, but it was hard to crack into actually being able to do play-by-play with him because they already had him and Andy Griffin and Mike McGarry. Mike McGarry, of course, used to work for Doug Barton at Mid-Utah Radio years ago before going to St. George, and they were also good and great at it, but they were gracious enough to let me tag along for the most part, but I primarily just did color when I first started with them and just kind of got my feet wet doing it that way. Very
nice. I always am amazed at like, for instance, Rhett. I've known Rhett for a long time, and the play-by-play aspect of it, and you do a lot of play-by-play now. Play-by-play guys, hats off to them. You guys do a great job. Devin Dixon's still in the business. I see him on Twitter.
Yeah,
still.
Yeah, he's still doing it. So, yeah, he's got a lot of years left to be doing it. So it's good. But yeah, he's changed stations this summer, but yep, he's still doing it in St. George.
So you started there in St. George, and then the next move is up here?
No. So I graduated, was looking for places to go. I actually interviewed for a sales job at the radio station in St. George and didn't get the job. And so we started looking elsewhere. My wife and I prayed and tried to figure out where we needed to look and specifically where to go. My dad was instrumental at this point. I mean, he was instrumental for a lot of things growing up with the sports side of it, but he found a sportscaster's agent, basically. It's called Sportscasters Talent Agency of America. Paid for my initial membership there, and they just start feeding you full of good stuff on how to be a better broadcaster, but also job market ideas. And so one of the states we decided we'd look specifically in was Colorado, and found a job in a town called Ray, W-R-A-Y. It's about the size of Gunnison, in the northeastern corner of Colorado. And applied for the job there. And Wayne Johnson's the owner of Media Logic Radio in northeastern Colorado. And he called me and he said, "I love everything I've seen, but I haven't heard you do play-by-play." And so I was doing the Pineview Cedar football game that night with Andy Griffin. And I just said, "Andy, can I do the second quarter? I just need one quarter of play-by-play so I can send this guy." And so I did the second quarter, sent it to him, and we went out there. And he offered me the job while we were out there. And so we were there for about a year and a half, and then went on to North Platte, Nebraska for 2 years, and then decided to make a change, and this is where we came next.
Sounds like a college basketball coach, just going from small gig to small gig to small gig, and finally landing where you want to be. And maybe this is is this where you want to be?
Well, this is the longest we've been anywhere.
Okay, that's why I say that. I kind of went out on a limb, but it was
kind of a coming home, right? And part of it was that when we were in Nebraska, my at the time 5-year-old said, how come we never get to see Grandma and Grandpa, or only get to see him a couple of times a year, right? And so that was part of what spurred it. And I called Doug Barton. He had no idea who I was, right, and didn't know anything about me. And I just said, "Hey, this is who I am. This is what I do. If you ever have a job come open, I'd appreciate it if you think of me." And about a month later, he called and offered me the job. So it was good.
Very nice.
Interesting. So one of the questions I always have is, do you have a favorite announcer, favorite play-by-play guy that as you're growing up? I remember being a kid watching some old games. You're watching Joe Garagiola and Vin Scully doing old Dodgers games on a Saturday afternoon, or Howard Cosell. That's going way back. But you can remember some of these guys, Dickie Vitale, now in the college game. But did you have anybody you looked and said, "Hey, I want to be like that guy"?
Well, I mean, does it get any better than Hot Rod Hundley?
Hot Rod Hundley.
So, I mean, he was the ultimate broadcaster for both radio and TV, right? He's the one that did the simulcast for so many years. And Al Michaels has always been my favorite TV guy as far as a TV broadcaster goes, because TV and radio are two very different types of broadcasts.
Yes. And
so Al Michaels is my favorite TV guy, but radio, it doesn't get better in my mind than Hot Rod Hundley and than what he did. And obviously as a Jazz fan, that's going to be a key piece for my thinking there. But Vince Scully on the baseball side is the greatest, right? So those are some of the ones I would think of as the key guys for me.
Maybe I'm the dumb one here in the room, but to me, it wasn't until I got out of coaching basketball and started watching a little bit more and paying attention. And Andy started getting into and I started getting into this podcast, and I started realizing that a radio play-by-play guy is much different than a TV play-by-play guy. Explain to our listeners just briefly what is the difference.
Well, I mean, obviously,
like I said, I'm the dumb one that took me to figure this out here.
Obviously, in a TV broadcast, people watching can see what's going on, right? They can see what's laid out before them. So your TV guys are talking oftentimes not even about the game. They're talking about different things, and when something happens, they'll come to it, and they're talking with the players and the court and the coaches and those kind of things. But the radio guys, he's got to set the stage. And he's got to tell the story of what's happening on the floor and what's happening in the arena as a whole. What's happening? What are the coaches doing? What's the crowd reaction like? But set the stage of where the ball is and what's going on, because they can't see it. And so the theater of the mind is the key to radio. And so that's what drew me to radio. That's why I loved radio. More than just doing a TV. I liked that aspect.
And that's why I started hearing these old phrases in my mind that totally make sense now when radio announcers talk about, and the Jazz have the ball, they win the tip and they're going left to right or right to left. And they explain their uniforms, the color of the uniforms, the white trimmed in purple and gold. And like I said, I'm the slow one in the group here. So, but and also too, I noticed in doing games with as a color guy with Rep, play-by-play guys, they do 99% of the talking. I mean, they're going all the time, and sometimes I'm just like, oh, there's not much for me to add here because they're just going. And high school games are so fast.
They are.
There's really not much stoppage. So, play-by-play guys, radio play-by-play guys. My hat's off to you.
Oh, thank you. You talk about that. I remember I stole the phrase Stockton yo-yos up top, right, from Hot Rod Hundley. He used the yo-yo term. And I used that term fairly often, and I did it when I was in Nebraska. And my boss one day came and he said, I don't know what that means. What does it mean that he yo-yos? Does it mean he darts in and out? And I'm like, no, what do you do with a yo-yo? You just drop it down and bring it back up, right? It's up and down.
Hot Rod Hundley.
Yeah, it's fun to be able to listen to it. I remember just being a kid, listen to a lot of the games back then. You didn't have a choice. If somebody was playing out of town, hopefully you dial up AM 650 and you could get the game on the radio. And it was fun as a kid. I remember just listening and you could hear everything. And you had the specific announcers back in the day when Gunnison was back in 1A. And so it's been fun to see that transition and as it's moved from the radio into the TV to the simulcast, and so you can really get to see and hear and do all those things, and so it's fun. I appreciate what you guys are able to do and the ability. I've done one game, my son's senior year. Gunnison was playing down in Monticello, and I and Rhett did one. He was doing play-by-play, and I did the color, and I didn't realize how fast, because I had all these cool things in my mind. I'm like, I'm going to say all these neat things, and you have like these 5-second blips. Right. And I'm like, oh, shoot, I missed it. They come back, and it's a tough thing. So it made me very much appreciate what you do to make that happen.
And obviously the best play-by-play guys know how to set their color guys up to be able to do that, and that's, I mean, Hot Rod Hundley, David Locke's fine, but he's not Hot Rod Hundley. Like Ron Boone looked so smart as a color guy with Hot Rod Hundley because Hot Rod set him up so good. And Ron Boone is smart. He doesn't get that same opportunity now, I feel like, with Locke, but he set him up so well. And that's color guys, play-by-play guys know how to make their color guys look good too, the good ones.
That's good.
That is a great point.
I'm learning a lot tonight about this. That's true. So we talked about this briefly before we started recording. What's your favorite game you've ever called?
Oh, see this, you told me you'd ask me that, And I don't know. There's been so many games, and I wrote down a handful of games that I just remember as being impactful. Yeah. But one of the first ones I thought of was actually, so when I was in Nebraska, I covered a junior college out there as well as a high school. And so North Platte Community College basketball team, a Division I team, I think they were ranked 15th in the country at the time. They played Dodge City, Kansas, and they had a guy, a European on their team, Marco Pascola was his name. And he had a game winner to beat Dodge City, Kansas, and I'm up in this little crow's nest on the end of the court in this weird box, and I mean that was one of the most incredible games I've ever seen. And I love doing high school sports, but it is amazing to watch those really good junior college teams like Snow College. I mean those teams,
athletes are crazy.
Yeah, it is so fun to watch those teams. So that was one of the games that just stood out to me. I got the chance to broadcast Juab's first football state title. And that happened during COVID, and I've got to know Coach Bowering over the last several years, and that was a neat moment for me to be there for that game as they beat Morgan, and just an incredible football game. I mean, it was a great football game. You guys remember South Sevier taking state at the girls basketball team, taking state up at Salt Lake Community College. Cassie Johnson, who comes off the screen to hit the 15-footer with just seconds left to beat Taya Sidbury and Judd Memorial in that state championship. I mean, that was that atmosphere there for both the girls game and then the Richfield Manti boys game that followed that. I mean, both those games were just some incredible games up at Slick. Then, I'm from Delta, right, where wrestling is king and football is king. And I'm part of baseball has always been my favorite sport. But if I was told I could only play one, looking back, it would have been football at Delta because that's what mattered. Everybody came out to football games. And so it was weird to me to move to Sevier County where football isn't that big of a deal. But I was told about these Richfield South Sevier boys basketball games. And my first Richfield South Sevier boys basketball game was an incredible game. And so my wife wasn't there. She was home with our kids. But I remember going thinking, holy cow, this is I haven't been to a basketball game like this where the full bleachers are out and every seat is taken and there's no room to even have our camera or anything. I mean, it was that game was incredible. And there's been a lot of South Sevier Richfield basketball games since then that have been really fun to broadcast because of the atmosphere that comes with that rivalry. I remember thinking Gunnison's state title in baseball in 2017, and you've got Drew Hill, the in my mind, the best player in 2A at that time. And obviously he showed that going on and pitching in the Big 12 and doing those things. He was a great player, but he wasn't a leadoff hitter typically. And Jared Anderson against Grand County moves him up to leadoff. And Drew Hill just got in that team's head so much that game. They walk him first step bat. He's still second, still third. And all of a sudden, Gunnison's got the lead. And Grand, who came in thinking, all right, Maine and Hill have already thrown. We're going to beat this team, and I thought the move by Jared Anderson there, and then what Drew Hill did in that game was incredible. That state championship game was a lot of fun. Parks Bartholomew on the mound for Gunnison as a sophomore. I mean, that was a heck of a game. So in other states, I broadcasted volleyball, and my first volleyball broadcast I had to do. I told my wife, I said, I need to know the rules of volleyball. So, I'd been to a handful of volleyball games, but I didn't know anything about how to do a broadcast of volleyball game. So she gave me a crash course on volleyball, and the team I covered in Colorado was, I think they won one game the year I was there, but I went to North Platte, Nebraska, where they've got legendary volleyball, and Nebraska is known for football and volleyball. Most people think of just football, but volleyball is huge in Nebraska. And there were Hall of Fame coaches at the high school that I covered, and the college I covered had a Hall of Fame coach for junior college. I mean, it was incredible, the volleyball there. But, and I put here just winning their district tournament to qualify for state, because they were in the biggest classification in Nebraska. They were western Nebraska. They were the closest. I mean, we had to go to Omaha and Lincoln 3 and 4 hours away every day, every week for games. And so they were the smaller, the undersized school in that classification, but they win their district tournament, and they have great players. Olivia Nicholson was on that team. She went to Colorado State for volleyball, and now she's playing overseas professionally, and there were just some great players on that team. But when I said this to my wife, just qualifying for the state tournament, she said, people in Utah don't get that. Everybody qualifies for the state tournament, right? It's a different world. When you go to Colorado and Nebraska and there's 72-way teams, it's a big deal to be the final 8. Or when there's 38, or I think there's like 38 Class A, which is the biggest classification in Nebraska teams, it's a big deal to make it to the state tournament and be able to play at University of Nebraska for those state tournaments. So that was a phenomenal game. I've got more, so I mean you can keep me going all day. But
I tell you what we need to do first before we go on.
You do it.
Is I'm going to loosen that microphone thing for you, because you're at it. So we stop banging it. So you guys visit for a second. I'm going to find a screwdriver real quick, and we're back.
Okay. All right.
Sorry, had a little technical difficulties with Rob's mic here. He's a little animated, so we had to adjust a few things so he could be on his A game and not be restricted by the cord by the microphone here. So anyway, sorry to disrupt that.
Yeah, so we started talking about volleyball, and then you were just keep going on about favorite games.
Yeah.
Give us a couple more, Rob.
So as far as volleyball goes, so I said a Hall of Fame coach for the college I broadcasted games for, Sally Falcon, when I was my first year there in North Platte, Nebraska. I got to call her 900th win of her career. I mean,
how many years is that?
I don't remember how many years it was, but she was one of the ones a person that just made an impact on me. And when I did my final show, I hosted a daily 1-hour sports talk show on an ESPN affiliate there. And when I did my final show, she just showed up in the studio that day. And so, I mean, just a great relationship that I got to be there. But I got to call her 900th win. When I was in Colorado, they went to a tournament in Goodland, Kansas every year. It's called the Topside Tip-Off, and it was just the arena was so cool. It was a round arena. I can't remember what it was called, but it was just a great arena to be at. And just calling those tournament games there were so fun. Both boys and girls tournaments going on at the same time, kind of like we have at state tournaments here, right? And the girls team that I covered for Ray, they lost their first game on Thursday, so they played very early in the off gym Friday morning, and you talk about getting early to set up, right? I'm there at least 2 hours early every game, getting all the stuff set up and making sure things are working and doing that, and so I'm there early, and I'm the first one in the gym basically, except for the janitor, and I walk in to set my stuff up. My wife was with me, and we only had one kid at the time, and we walk in, and there's this guy in there shooting, and he's got his one of the assistant coaches for the team. Ottawa, Kansas was the high school, and he's passing back to him. And well, that guy's in the NBA now. Shemi Ojale played for Ottawa, Kansas, and that was fun to watch him there because he was all those scouts were there from colleges, and he goes on to play for Duke, and he was Jabari Parker's year at Duke, and he kind of flamed out at Duke, but he went to SMU, rebuilt his career, and then obviously got drafted by the Celtics. But it was fun to watch him and to call those games at that tournament. It was a lot of fun. You know, one of my favorite games recently was baseball this spring. Juab hitting that walk-off home run, and that was just an incredible game to be at. Corey Sorensen was on the call with me on that one, and there at UVU, the hit was incredible. They probably should have won it earlier, but the walk-off was a lot of fun to see and be a part of that. My first baseball year here, so when I first came, they didn't do baseball, maybe a handful of games over 20-something years. Yeah. And I told Doug, and I said, I want to do baseball and I want to do state wrestling. And they kind of laughed at me. And I said, no, we got to do these things. But that first year we did state wrestling, and we're down at Dixie State, Bruce Hurst Field, and that was an incredible North Severe baseball team, right? You got Fisher Anderson on that team, and Casey Anderson had an incredible year, and I mean that was a great baseball team, and they're playing Enterprise in the state championship, but they've got to beat Grand Saturday morning to get there. And Trevor Okerlund has got this rubber arm. Yes. He doesn't throw hard. He comes out and throws 14 straight innings, right? And beats Grand, beats Enterprise. Then North ends up losing to Enterprise 13-11 in the state champion, the final game, the if game of that state title. But I mean, how crazy was it to watch? I think he threw. I went and counted it when they brought the pitch count in. I think he threw 264 pitches that day, right? Which you couldn't get away with, but not
even close to that now.
You know, and I give a lot of credit to Nolan Anderson. I mean, he's a phenomenal coach, and he knew what Trevor could do. And Trevor was never going to pitch again in his life, right? And he's got one of those rubber arms that doesn't seem to get hurt, but man, that was a heck of a thing to watch. Right, just go, and he picks off a grand batter. I mean, that was a great game.
I'm glad you brought that up. Trevor's is a loyal follower of the podcast, so you can give him a shout out.
Trevor's one of my favorite. I've got players I've loved watching, and he's one of those guys I loved watching play, primarily basketball, right? But that was fun to watch him in that state tournament for baseball. Another basketball game that comes to mind is South Severe Delta 2018 semifinal game when Manti beat South Sevier, Devon's second state championship at Manti. And, you've got, for South Sevier, you've got Brody Tebbs and Caleb Barton and this team that's just loaded with great players. And Tyson Chisholm gets hit gets cut in his eye right at the end of the third quarter, and Delta's got all the momentum in the world in that game. And it takes like 25 minutes to clean the blood off the floor because only one person in all of Dixie State was allowed to clean the blood off the floor. And so it gave South Sevier long enough time to get him stitched up and back on the court, and it just killed Delta's momentum. But, that was a phenomenal semifinal game. Because you've got Derek Smith, that was his sophomore year for Delta. Dynamic. I think that was maybe Delta's best team ever, except for maybe their state championship in 72. But that was just an incredible game to watch and to be there for. Tyson Chisholm, speaking of that, his 400-yard rushing game that he had against the ALA in the playoffs.
That is incredible.
I can't run 400 yards just in a day, right? Yeah. But for him to be able to do it in that game, it was fun to watch. So those are just, there's I know there's more, but man, I've gotten the opportunity to be a part of a lot of great games. When I say be a part of, to help bring those games to fans and viewers and listeners all over, that's been the key.
I can just listen to you talk. I'm sure of the more places you go, just in our small little world. Andy mentioned this earlier as we were talking before the podcast. You meet so many cool people that you never would meet, and I'm sure the list of people you've met, coaches, players, assistant coaches that no one knows about, probably met a lot of amazing people.
Oh, that's for sure. I'll tell you one that wasn't maybe that amazing. I have asked, most coaches are willing to talk to me, right? I go ask a coach, I say, hey, can I get your starters for the game? This is when I was in Colorado. He's like, well, only if you tell me Ray's starters. All right, I'm pretty sure he expects you to know his starters already, but anyway. But one of my favorite people that I got to meet was the men's college basketball coach at North Platte Community College, Kevin O'Connor. He is cut straight from the cloth of Jerry Sloan. Just a great coach. He's been there for over 35 years now. He played there before moving on to a D1 school, and then came back and coached. And he's one of those very colorful guys that is very genuine when you get to know him. And the first year I was there, my wife would go over with me to a lot of games, and we went down to play Trinidad State in Trinidad, Colorado. Have you ever been to Trinidad?
Never been there.
All right, it's not known for the greatest thing. You can figure that out on your own. But we go there, and the gym is in the top of this 3-story building, the top floor of a building, right? The gym. Okay. So that's the floor, and we walk in, and there's one bench all the way around the floor, and then above it is a rafter with three bleachers that hang out right to the edge of the floor. So it is a unique gym in and of itself. Well, they've got this little tiny booth for me to broadcast in, and it's right next to the bench for the players for North Platte. My wife's there with our 4-year-old son, and they're sitting right behind the bench, and he knows how to let loose a string of obscenities. And so he let the players have it, and he let loose the string. And we came back from that game. My wife said, "My son will never play for him." And but then we got to know him, and when we had our third child, we had our second and our third child. We lived in Nebraska, and when we had our third child, Layla, he actually came to the hospital and saw us and saw her. And just such an amazing guy. He's kind of the Bob Knight of junior college basketball, right? He's the guy that throws the chairs, but such a genuine individual. Just he's a great basketball coach. He's really good friends with Tom Kropp, who was the coach at University of Nebraska Kearney, who played for Jerry Sloan when Jerry was the Bulls player coach. And so he has, when I say he's cut from Jerry Sloan, the cloth of Jerry Sloan, he actually he's good friends with Jerry Sloan, and so it was fun to kind of be there and talk Jerry Sloan stories as a Jazz fan and get to know him more. But he's one of those great guys that I got to be around. And there's the girls basketball coach in Colorado that I covered. I remember they had a decent team, average team, maybe slightly above average team, but they were playing the number one team in the state, and it was their rival. And they hung with them pretty good for about 2.5 quarters. Third quarter, the team they were playing took control and pulled away. And I asked him in the postgame show, I just said, "Hey, how do you stop those runs?" And he just looked at me and he said, "I've got to have better players."
There you go.
So, but he was, again, one of those just great guys and great people to be around. And the football coach there was Levi Kramer was his name, and their colors were purple. I didn't know anything purple in my life, by the way, and their rivals were both red. So I was not allowed to wear red anywhere, even just around town, right? And I went to Delta and Dixie.
I was going to say, you're
right. I got a lot of red, and but he shows up before this freezing cold football game. You guys remember the Hamburglar?
Oh, yeah.
And Grimace.
Grimace.
Okay, so he shoes up, and he's in this big puffy purple suit, and just to stay warm. And I mentioned it to him before the game. I said, "Man, you look like Grimace out here." And we laughed about it or whatever, but he said, "You cannot say anything about that on the air." And so I said, "I won't say it." And he comes up in the post-game show, and I just said, we talked about this before the game, and I was referring to a point that he brought up for the actual game, and he's like, "No, you told me you wouldn't say anything about Grimace," before I could even say it. And so he ends up bringing it up on the air. But just another great guy to be around, and there's so many great coaches here. I mentioned Mike Bowring and getting to know him and how great of a guy he is. And he said something to me when I interviewed him a few years ago that he wants to instill in his team. And I'm sure most coaches or all coaches hope their teams get this, but I think he's done such a great job at doing that for JUAB football. And he said, our guys don't count their reps, but they make their reps count. And just a great thing to be able to get out of your team and to get your team to understand how valuable that is. Some of the guys, the coaches that I get to know and have really good relationships with aren't necessarily the teams that we cover. We've got our 11 2A and 3A schools that we cover a lot, and then a few more 1A schools that we look at there. But Gary Crittenden for North Summit, wrestling coach and football coach for North Summit, I've gotten to know him really well over the years, and he's one that always makes a point to come say hi to me, and I appreciate that and what he does. Jim Nelson from Anti-Baseball. I could talk stories with him all day. He one day when Kanab brought the wood bats into the Chuck Wagon Classic tournament, and he comes in and he says, "My guys are so excited about this. They're going and buying wood bats." And I'm like, "Guys, what's the big deal? You can't hit it as far, right?" So it's just bring people back to reality a little bit here. But coaches, parents that I've got to know, athletic directors. I mean, there's been a lot of great people that I've gotten to know, and that's one of the things as far as like being in Colorado, Nebraska, that I miss from being here. Because like there, I got to know. I mean, I did all those 1 or 2 teams games, right? And so I was almost a part of the team there.
Involved, yeah.
And I rode with the basketball team for college. I'd ride the bus, and there were some scary bus rides coming back when he was after a loss. When he was not happy, but I got to ride the bus and be a part of those things, and I got invited to all the banquets at the end of the year. And I miss that part of it because I don't get that here, covering more teams and doing that. But there's still a lot of great people that I get to meet and get to know and be able to learn from you guys being some of them, right? So yeah, I mean, it's a fun thing to do.
How long have you been at Mid-Utah?
So in May, I've been here 8 years.
8 years, okay.
Yep.
Because I say it was probably during the time that I was coaching that you had came in.
Yeah.
Mike was here. I remember Mike the first couple of years, and then I remember you shortly after there. So that is one thing that I'm tell you, coaches. When people see coaches, they view them from what they see from the sidelines, and I think, when that guy is an absolute turd or that guy is a jerk or whatever. But when you meet them, you are correct. When you meet them, every coach, believe it or not, parents out there, every coach wants the best for kids, right. And they really do their best. They want to win,
yeah,
and they want all kids to be successful. So you have just listening to you, I'm blown away. The names you can just rattle off.
That's all. I was just thinking the same thing. I'm like, very impressive.
From multiple states, you're naming off. What's the future of radio?
Future of radio. The future of radio is interesting. So I had the opportunity to meet with a guy by the name of Kevin Godwin this summer. He's the vice president over the West for Town Square Media, which is the 3rd largest radio group in the country. And I got to visit with him about things, and they're a group, they're the 3rd largest, but they have no big markets. In fact, he told me, he said, "We're not in California. We don't want to be in California." Their biggest is Boise, but it's their biggest because it's grown. That's where they've always kind of had a station there, and it's just grown. But he, as I visited with him, and this has kind of always been my belief, and what I love about radio is the local aspect of it. They want the local tie, And that's what makes radio successful. If you want to know what's going on in local sports or local news or local weather, radio is where you can go. And so for radio as a whole, for local radio like we have here, as opposed to some of the bigger markets or national radio, the future is very bright, and there's a lot of great things happening. It's actually been interesting. Everybody obviously gave the question, is radio dying now that there's satellite radio? And the statistics come out, and that's actually grown to where 93% of Americans age 12 and up listen to at least an hour radio a week. And so that's actually grown over the last 10 years as opposed to dropping. Mm-hmm. And so it's, as far as the future radio, as long as it stays local, and Doug Barton at Mid-Utah Radio and Bo Lund, those guys that run the show for real, they do a good job of making sure it stays here and stays local.
That's great to hear.
Yeah. What do you envision, or maybe in a perfect world, if you were king for one day and could wave your magic wand, what would you do different or to improve what you're currently doing right now? If there was really no
sports,
limits,
right?
Yeah.
So I'd probably add some sports coverage to it, but that's what I love, is the sports coverage, and what I love about radio is just strictly bringing the community involvement into it, whether it's through sports or whether it's through doing fundraisers for things and for people or whatever it may be. I love the local connection, mm-hmm. and bringing that to people. You talk about doing what games and how I decide what games we broadcast. I put more emphasis on road games for our teams than I do home games. And the reason is because it's a lot easier for me to walk down the street and go to a basketball game than it is for me to drive to Altamont and go to a basketball game. And so I want the community connection there, and bringing that to the community to where it's going to impact more people. Sports, news, fundraisers, again, community events, those kind of things. That's what I love about radio. And so the hard piece of that is the people to do it, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Is making sure you have the people to do so, to be able to add more of that. But I think we do a lot right now, but we could always add more, right?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. When we started the podcast, we've talked about this for a couple years now, and Benny was coaching and a lot of things going on, and it just never was the right time, and you probably knew about his son Jackson.
Oh, yeah.
When Jackson passed, Ben stopped coaching, and we're kind of trying to decide, all right, what are we going to do now, especially him? What are you going to do with your time, and how are we going to stay connected? I had a son that played and graduated 2 years ago, and he went on his mission. It's like, okay, what can we do? We're like, I should do a podcast. And we think, this will be easy, right? But just start up a podcast. And you realize that we had the idea, and it's like, all right, then you got to get the equipment. Then we started getting sponsors, right? Because it takes some money to run this, even though we always say we're certainly not breaking the bank or making any money doing this, but you've got to have that backing to get your word out. Yeah. And then from there, I remember one of the first times, I don't know if you remember this, it would have been 2 years ago at the 2A preview. We showed up and we had no idea what we were doing. We walked down to the press row down there, and everybody kind of looks at us like, who are these hacks?
I think I made Brad James upset. I got in his space a little bit.
Yeah, and so
it's all right.
So the only reason why I say that is, we had in our minds what we want, our vision of what we wanted to do, and our vision was two things. Number one, we wanted to really keep Jackson's name alive and what he did and what he fought for and what he stood for. But the second real mission we had was to bring the 2A community together. We didn't know how we were going to do it. We just said, all right, we're going to go start to do this. And so as time went on, it was just bit by bit, and every little game that happened or every podcast, somebody else would reach out or little things would happen. One by one, it started to grow. And we still have a lot of bigger ideas. This year we brought on Peyton to add girls basketball. And we thought, this will be great. It's been much more difficult than we had ever imagined, just because
the sheer volume of it.
Just the sheer volume is once you get into the season, even just boys basketball, like right now, it's all you can do to try to you work your full-time job and you try to keep up on all this stuff, and Ben's chasing his boys still, and it's tough. And so I appreciate what you guys are doing on that side, because I think it's easier than just, these guys just get on the microphone and go and broadcast a game. And we've mentioned this before, there's so much that goes on behind the scenes to try to make that happen. I actually had somebody reach out to me the other day. He said, what does it take to start a podcast? I'm like, well, where do you want me to start?
More than you think.
More than you think. And actually getting up and going is just one thing. And we have been very, very blessed in the fact that people have, we joke and say people actually listen to us. But I think it comes down to what is the message and how it gets presented. It's like anything else. If you put a good product out there and you're doing it for the right reasons and you're trying to reach people, it works. And I think for us, we've been very blessed in the fact that our mission has worked and people have bought into that and people like what we're doing. It's nothing necessarily we're doing. We're just sharing the message.
Right.
We're kind of the messengers out here. So kind of talking in circles here, but I think that circles back to what you guys do too, is for these local communities, this is it. You know, high school basketball in the wintertime, whether it's girls basketball or boys basketball or wrestling or football in the fall, you know, that's the community. That's everybody rallies around that. And without that ability to get that out there, there's a lot of people that miss that out. You know, you live in Gunnison, sometimes you can't go to Colville, or you can't go to Altamont, or you can't go to Monticello, but you can listen on the radio, and I can hear somebody on the radio. So appreciate everything that you do.
Interesting thought on that. This year in 2A, we've got games Tuesday through Saturday, almost every night.
Yeah.
Has that been a logistic nightmare for you?
Yeah, you see the schedule I send out every week, and trying to get, you know, and I call all the athletic directors the week before to make sure we can have the ability to do it right at their place, their buildings, and making sure, you know, Doug does a good job of getting people at the station those nights to make sure things run smooth on the back end. And but yeah, it's made it so that there's a lot more stuff going on. Region 19's messing us up. We're going to Tuesday.
Yeah,
Thursday.
they kind of throwing a wrench in it.
Yeah, I was actually talking to Ryan Nilsson about that yesterday. I said it's interesting that, you know, Region 16 goes Wednesday, Friday, and now they're going Tuesday, Thursday. So it's
Saturday.
So it's
so wherever San Juan is, there's
yes,
going to be Saturday.
That's true. They're kind of the odd one out. But this year's been very different. Very different.
It has.
Well, I appreciate it. This has been fantastic. We had Coach Shakespeare on here a couple weeks ago, and we ended up talking about what was the high school that he coached at first? Pinnacle High School. Yeah. And Benny had mentioned, you know, how would we ever have guessed we get Coach Devin Shakespeare on here and we're talking about Pinnacle High School. I never would have guessed that you would have came on here and we would be talking about North Platte.
That's right.
And
North Platte, Nebraska, and Ray, Colorado.
Talking about volleyball. But this is why we do this. So people know and they see you that you're not just, you know, this random guy who's doing things, that there's a backstory, and I think those backstories are important to getting to know who you are and what you do and what your passion is, and I think that changes things. So it's fun.
Yeah. So awesome having you here.
Been very, very appreciative of that. Well, we're gonna move on. We still got a lot of stuff to talk about. We're gonna get into the nuts and bolts here. We're gonna move into a segment this year that we called Inside the Numbers. This segment's sponsored by Kimball and Roberts Accounting in Richfield. Always supporting their South Severe Rams out there. Lance is on coaching staff. He has a connection here to Gunnison. His wife's from Gunnison.
That's right.
Stacy's from Gunnison. So say there's a connection there. Inside the Numbers tonight, we want to kind of do a little bit of a breakdown of the South Severe Enterprise game the other night.
What's your initial thoughts of that, Rob? Just on the surface.
It was a fun game, and I came away looking at it saying Enterprise played a great game. They had a great game plan. You know, most teams at this point, for the last several years, most teams have said Ridge Tebs when they want to stop somebody for South Severe, and deservedly so. So the guy is an incredible scorer. But most teams now are starting to say we've got to slow down Emilio Miramontes.
Yeah,
and Emilio is just an incredible player. What he does, he can score. His knack for knowing where the ball is going to go off of rebounds is incredible. But they did a great job of taking away Emilio Miramontes. And Ridge struggled to shoot in the first half. I don't think it was because of Enterprise's defense. It was just an off night for Ridge. He got going eventually, but I think Enterprise did a great job of trying to limit Emilio Miramontes in that game. And I think Emilio has the ability in him to rise above what they were doing. And so the rematch will be awesome down in Enterprise. And then the ability in that second half, especially to say, all right, we've got to get it down to Trayson Whitman and we've got to get it down to Austin Thomas, right? We've got the size advantage. We're going to take advantage of it. I was a little disappointed that South Severe didn't make some adjustments to find a ways
defensively
to take that away because they just went. I mean, there was I think six in a row at one point. They just went right on the post and drop step layup, and so that was. I don't think either of them necessarily played their best game. I thought Enterprise executed their game plan better than South Severe did, and so it'll be interesting to see how it comes back when they go to Enterprise. But when South Severe's up 61-55, I thought South Severe was going to win this game. Enterprise came right back into it, went on a 13-0 run, six points to tie it, 7 points to start overtime. That was an incredible run.
Yeah. My initial feel of watching the game, it seemed like both teams were a little tight.
I agree.
And
yeah,
it just felt like there was a lot of
it was a 1-2 matchup, right?
nervous energy because it was quiet. The gym was quiet. I don't know if you could hear
that
it.
First quarter felt really eerie.
It was real quiet. Enterprise wasn't a whole lot of emotion, and South Severe didn't have a whole lot of emotion. So
I really felt like you could tell South Severe hadn't played a game in 10 days.
Mm-hmm. Great point.
I felt like they didn't have their game legs under them to start that game, because there's a difference in practices and games, and I felt like it took them a half to really get those game legs going too.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing that I was really excited to see, as it's obvious that you've got two contrasting styles that couldn't be any more different.
Right.
And that's what was fun when we go through this tail of the tape here, the breakdown of the game. Even though there was two starkly different philosophies and game plans, the stats were pretty darn close. Obviously, it went to overtime, but statistically, it's pretty darn equal across the board.
Yeah. So, you go into overtime, so we play 4 quarters, and it was a game of runs. Obviously, Enterprise, I want to say it was kind of back and forth, and then South Severe goes on the run. You could just feel that momentum switch, and then it went right back, and it was like, okay, Enterprise was right there, and then they come swinging right back. Tibbs kind of kept them in.
I don't think there was a spread longer. I think South Severe might have had a 7-point spread, and I think Enterprise had a 6-point spread.
My bag somewhere, but
there was not much. It was within 2 possessions the whole game, which was what made it so awesome.
Yeah. So a couple interesting things. Obviously, 75-67 win by Enterprise. Field goals attempted. So this was interesting. 64-64.
Wow.
Directly even, but this is where it starts breaking down. So you start getting down field goal percentage. The Wolves 48% and South Severe 33%. So obviously not the best shooting night for the Rams. Regular field goals, Enterprise Wolves took 53 field goals. The Rams 37.
2-point field goals.
2-point field goals, yes, 2-point field goals. And then you look into the threes. Obviously, this was a stark difference. I think everybody knew going into this, this was going to be the difference in the game, right? South Severe loves to shoot those 3-point shots from the perimeter. So they shot 9 for 27 for 33%. Enterprise only made 1 for 11, and that one was a dagger by Dax Hunt late in the game. Brady Crouch just couldn't find his range inside the free throw line. He could elevate,
right. And I don't know that 3 is his. I don't think his true range. But his ability to stop on a dime from 15 feet.
Yeah.
And jump 4 feet in the air and make that shot is an incredible ability to do that. Yeah. But I think 3 is his natural. Like that's Dax Hunt's a shooter, right? He's a set shooter.
Dax is the
shooter. That's what he does. But Brady Crouch's ability to penetrate and then stop on that dime and lift and hit that 15-footer.
Just as much as we've last year watching these guys play, especially Brady play, I was a little surprised the amount of 3-point shots that he actually took.
I agree.
Traditionally, he's not taking that shot. Even at the top of the key when he's open, I think his first look is either to penetrate or to go somewhere else. So
what did he shoot? Six threes, I think, in that game.
6, and just didn't look really comfortable. Took Ridge a little while to get going. I don't know. I talked to him early on. I know they put Dax on him. Dax has got the big long arms and extended that range a little bit. I know a lot of the early shots, they backed him up a little bit, and then Ridge finally got going.
That 3 at the end of the third quarter for Ridge was huge.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that kept South Severe in it, and then it got him going.
Yes.
Yeah. So a couple other stats in here. Free throw shooting, Enterprise 12 for 15, 80%. 8 for 10 for the Rams, 80%. Offensive rebounds, 7 and 9 for each, pretty close. Defensive rebounds, Enterprise has a slight edge, 27-24. Here was an interesting stat. Bench points, the Wolves had 0 bench points.
Yeah.
Randall came off the bench, played some good minutes, but did not score. But on the other side for the Rams, they've got those sophomores that come in. They had 18 points coming off the bench.
Yeah.
So
2 of those sophomores and then the 1 senior.
Yeah, so I thought that was in. Walser hit 2 big threes late in the second half, and then with Roberts and Brindley coming off, they both played some big minutes. So I thought that was interesting that even though the Wolves did go 7-8 deep, no bench points for Enterprise for the night.
Yeah.
So
I got a text from Bud tonight. I was asking him about the stats and if he had anything interesting to say, and he just went through these, how equal the stats were. He threw out a couple other stats, Andy, you don't have listed here. Assists, Enterprise had 17, South Severe had 14, and turnovers, but there was 12 total turnovers in the game total for both teams. Yeah. It was a clean, fast game. Fast-played game. Enterprise had 4 turnovers, South Severe 8 turnovers. So you were correct when the game plan that Enterprise had. It wasn't necessarily the most dynamic game, I should say, but it was what they wanted to do. It was clean. They didn't turn the ball over only 4 times, and that was the tale of the game. It was how clean they played, and as Andy has listed here, now if you shoot 33% overall from three-point range, that's pretty good. Most coaches will take 33. I mean, anything
like
above
35 or above is kind of that benchmark, right? But you're
that's
close.
Pretty good. But they just shot a lot more. Their volume of threes was much higher. They didn't have many twos, so the difference there is South Severe or Enterprise just scored more, had more field goals.
Yeah.
So, any other statistical takeaways you thought?
No, those are the main ones. Yeah, I remember you went to the largest lead. I think it was 7 for South Severe, 6 for Enterprise until the 8-point lead to win it right there at the end. It was fun to watch, and again, it was really a great game. I think the next time we see them play, I'm actually expecting maybe some more fireworks, because hopefully they won't be. I like how you said it. They seemed to be a little nervous to start that game, and so I don't think they'll have that the next time around.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see South Severe had no answer for Whitmore or Thomas.
Yeah.
Thomas, we like to say that Thomas was playing big boy basketball on Tuesday night down there. He was elevating the way that he was rebounding. He got down on that block, left-hand block. Bastion was in there. He got the early foul trouble. Other than that, they really had no answer for either one of them. I'm interested to see in the next matchup where that goes, because Enterprise isn't going to go away from that, right? Those are the
Why
guys.
Would you?
Yeah, they're Whitman and Thomas down.
Both of them. Whitman's strength as a sophomore. He's
very impressive.
Strong.
Yes.
He's a strong post player. He looked good.
Strong, and I think it seemed as the game went on, you could see Thomas, his energy level started going up. Late in the fourth quarter, he was getting big rebounds. I'll be interested to see down in Enterprise. I think it'll be a different feel on their floor down there. They'll have a packed house guarantee down there.
When do they play?
I think it's in 2 or 3 weeks, like the 27th of January. I think they play. But I'm interested to see how they change that up. Obviously, in basketball you got to make shots. So if South Severe makes even 4 or 5 more 3-point shots, it's a different game.
Yep.
Does the defensive strategy that Bud rolls out against them, does that change? Or they go out and they do the same thing? I don't know. The great thing is you're 2 very different styles of basketball that don't necessarily match up have to go against each other again.
Yeah. And Riley Barney was limited in that game, and that hurt South Severe. I mean, he's their main defensive stopper, and but then you've got I thought Keegan Heath played an excellent game for South Severe, and how they use Keegan Heath, because if he's able to pull Thomas Whitman outside, Keegan will have the advantage there. He doesn't when they're inside, right? But outside, and that's where he got his points early, was being able to take advantage of his speed over their size.
Yes. The scary thing for me in watching this is, obviously we know how dangerous South Severe is. If they get hot, they shoot 40% from the 3. I mean, it's lights out. The scary thing for me on Enterprise side is they can replicate what they just did.
Right.
That's the scary thing, is if they keep building their flow and how they're playing together, you can keep pounding the post game after game after game.
It's not dependent upon a hot shooting night.
It's not dependent.
Right?
So that's the scary thing. I guess a good thing for Bud, scary for everybody else, is that they can replicate what they just did. But I think South Severe, I think they will come firing back. Yeah. They really will. They just got too much firepower. So
and I know one thing, and I talked to some of the guys. I talked to Ridge and Heath before the game. We were kind of walking in. They were warming up, and just visited with them for a minute. They've got some guys that are a little banged up, and so hopefully, this weekend trip going over to San Juan yesterday probably didn't help. But I know that they said a bunch of guys got some ankle issues and banged up a little bit. If they can get back healthy, that'll be good.
I think they just have the one game this week. They go to Kanab, and that's it this week.
So they need some time to rest up a little bit. With that being said, every game in Region 19 is like this. There's no night. They found that out as they went to Beaver a couple nights later. Beaver had it tied in the third quarter, and I know eventually they pulled away, but same thing. There's no nights off in Region 19. You're every other night when you're playing, it's this type of atmosphere. And so that's one thing I'm looking at down the road is now that you get into region, can all these teams, South Sevier, everybody out there, can these guys keep healthy as they go through and make this run? Because this is where the grind happens, right? This like these next 4 or 5 weeks, it's just grinding through. And, guys are starting to get a little bit tired, a little bit banged up, and I think this is where gut check time happens. This is where, hey, we got to go out every night. Sometimes we don't feel the best, but we got to make it work. So,
and I think you talk about that. And I think for South Sevier, you mentioned them. For the last several years, it's been a 6, maybe a 7-man rotation.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
And this year they've got a 10, 11, 12-man rotation that they feel confident they can go to. And those sophomores like Stockton Roberts and Brace Brindley and Max and Bastion and Kenyon Okerlund, and then there's a couple others that they feel they're comfortable putting in there as well. I think that's been key for them and will be key for them. And for Enterprise, I think it's more of a potential issue because theirs is a 6, maybe 7, maybe 8-man rotation. They
don't go very deep this year.
Yeah, Segmiller played 6 minutes, right? And it's Trayson Randall, then Colton Segmiller for Enterprise.
Any other, just put you on the spot here, any other interesting nuggets that you have about South Sevier? I mean, you're there, you see a lot of them. Anything other interesting about South Sevier moving forward?
Yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting thing, right? You've got some people that are wanting to have a mix of juniors, seniors, and sophomores on their varsity squad, and South Sevier's got 6 seniors, 0 juniors, and then like 14 sophomores, and it's and I have an 8th grader, and there's that 8th grade class is similar to the sophomore class, where it's just a big, deep grade, and the freshman class isn't quite as strong in between. So they're kind of an every other year program right now is where they're at. So it'll be interesting to see kind of how that all gels and works together, where you're going to have some of those leaner years followed by some stronger years.
Yeah. I've been very impressed with that sophomore group, though.
Yeah, that's a good group.
We saw them saw a lot of them play last spring as freshmen playing baseball. So a lot of those kids play baseball, Stockton Roberts being one of them. And,
Kenyon Okerlund starting third baseman for him.
You see all those kids. So we had heard about this sophomore group that they had this year. I'm very impressed. I thought Bastion actually played a really good game.
Yeah.
I think
he's fun to watch.
He got a little overmatched at times, got in foul trouble early on, but he's going to be a good ball player.
He's got 5. He's going to try to use them.
Yeah. But it was a lot of fun. It was a good atmosphere. Looking forward to round number 2.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's kind of setting up to like it was with San Juan and Enterprise last year.
Yeah.
So it's going to be fun to see these guys. So that was a good breakdown. Appreciate that. Well, let's move on to the segment we say and talk about what really matters, and that's Power 5. The Power 5 this year is brought to us, by the good folks at Barney Trucking since 1947. The big, usually beautiful blue trucks, and now they've moved to some white trucks now, keeping the lights on here in Central Utah. If you're interested in working for Barney, reach out to them at barneyjobs.com. One of the things I did grab from my mom's house tonight.
I saw you had that.
So we've talked about this on the podcast before, and we've joked about it. So my dad, before he passed away, he worked for Barney Trucking, almost 40 years out there. And so one of the things that they have out there is Glenn, who just recently passed away. They have a Hall of Fame, HAUL Hall of Fame. And in 2012, my dad was inducted into the Glenn Barney Hall of Fame. And so I wanted to grab this year. I think at that point he'd worked there for about 35 years. The Barney family was very good to him over those years. And when he passed away, they were extremely good to my mom and to our family. And we joke about it all the time.
Hall of Fame.
I was over at my mom's house right before I come over, and I said, "Hey, where is that?" So I picked it up. So that's what that was. It's kind of fun, and they are also one of the other sponsors. When we reached out to them early on, right after we reached out to Chris, we reached out to Barney's and said, "Hey, you guys interested in supporting a podcast?" And they said, "Absolutely, we'll do it." So we appreciate the good folks at Barney Trucking. So let's talk about the Power 5. Benny, you want to give us the lay of the land and maybe give a little bit of update of how we come up with our Power 5?
Yes, the lay of the land real quick. We go with 2 dark horses. Those are teams that generally are on the outside, making a little bit of noise, winning some games, generally have a good record, but we don't know a whole lot about them. They haven't played a whole lot of the top 5 teams up to this point. So we have our 2 dark horses, and then we have 5 teams in the Power 5. We generally rank this off of, first and foremost, our gut test, what we see with our eyeballs and how we feel, and based upon games. And there's a lot that goes into the rankings. The funny thing is, I was listening to Enterprise was covering a game. They're not part of the Mid-Utah Radio Connection, are they?
No.
They were covering.
They use the Team Hive platform server,
and they cited a ranking, an unauthorized. What do they call it? Unofficial.
You guys are unofficial.
Yes,
Unofficial,
they referred to us as the unofficial ranking. So I text Bud. I said, make sure you let them know that we are the ranking. Anyway, so we go with our 5 teams. It's just the gut check and the eyeballs. Who are the best teams right now? If the state tournament happened on this Friday, what teams would be playing the best and would be the favorites? So to kick off our Power 5, there's one team that we do not know much about, other than we can go off their record and have had some big wins. That's American Heritage. They had some good wins early, they blew out San Juan, and that's when they first came on our radar. Since then, they've gone 6-2, so a lot of wins. They did recently, just last week, play Enterprise, and Enterprise blitzed them big time. It was 35, could have been 40.
Yeah, to me that was the test, right? Can you hang with a Region 19 team?
Yes.
And
so we've had American Heritage. We've had our eyeballs on American Heritage because they're going to play in a region where they're going to win a lot of games. So they're going to remain in that RPI, high in the RPI all season long, just based upon the fact they're going to get a lot of wins. Now they played Enterprise, the top team, and they showed out as to where they're at currently right now. But I think they're a dangerous team. They played San Juan early and blitzed them really well. So we're going to keep our eye on them because we've always liked to include teams from up north and try to learn more about them because it makes things, it just adds more variety.
And look, Roland Hall. I mean, they
Hall
played
is a great
well
example. Yeah,
last year. I mean, they had that post player. He was
Sam Andrews.
strong. Yeah, Sam Andrews. He was good.
So we got to know them, Coach Alvidrez, through the podcast, and great friends with him and staying good in contact with him. But that was some good variety, and we saw them come to the state tournament, and they showed out well.
Yeah,
showed out really well. So American Heritage is our first dark horse team. The next dark horse team we have is Duchesne.
Yeah,
Duchesne played a tough schedule this year, so they got. Their record wasn't that fantastic to start with. They got buried in the RPI, but they're winning now. Coach Hoops has them playing well going into region. Have you seen Duchesne this year?
Yeah, I did North Severe Duchesne last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess, and got to see them there. And then I saw them at the preview as well. I think Parker Crum is just one of the premier athletes in 2A, just overall athlete. I did the Duchesne Millard basketball game last year in Fillmore, and Millard's got Hunter Rhodes and Brant Stevens. I mean, they've got some great ball players. And on that night, Parker Crum was the best player on the floor, and that was when he was a sophomore. Now, North Severe held him scoreless, which is crazy to think that he could be held scoreless, right? But sure, I mean, Parker Crum is an incredible player for Duchesne, and so he's an X factor guy for me. That on any given night he can go off and will a team to a victory.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about they've got some key guys. They got Jep Young, big guys, so they have some post presence. They've got the Giants guys out front. Running the point, and then you're right, Parker Crum. I think he is one of the best all around athletes in 2A. Fantastic quarterback. He's a great baseball player, and then we know what we can do on the basketball court. We've yet to really see Duchesne really come out of their shell. As Benny mentioned, they loaded up early this year. Coach Hoops went all in with his guys, and we haven't really seen that Duchesne team. We saw them down in the preview. They look pretty good, but they haven't really taken off yet.
Yeah. Well, and another thing about Duchesne, which we always keep them hovering around the dark horse. Last week they were in the 5th spot in our Power 5. And what's interesting about Duchesne to me is they are the best match in Region 16. As far as Region 16 goes, they are the best matchup for Millard for whatever reason. They played Millard both games with one possession last year.
Yeah.
I think Millard won both of them. On a buzzer beater in Duchesne, and then it was a close game out here last possession as well. So they seem to be the kryptonite for Millard in Region 16.
Yeah.
So Coach Hoops, he's excited how his team's clicking right now. First and foremost, I mean, they're going to play tough-nosed defense, so they're going to be in every game. It's just whether or not they get consistent scoring. And if Jep Young can score like he has been, Parker and they get another third scorer to add to that, they will be dangerous.
That can be Porter. It could be Cade Gines. I mean, there's some people that can certainly score for them. I think one of the keys for them is who they end up matching up with in the play-in game.
Exactly, yes.
You know, last year they got South Sevier in Monroe, 72-66. I mean, it was a 6-point game. But obviously you hope I think most teams are hoping they don't match up with one of those top 4 teams from Region 19.
Yeah, so Duchesne is going to be a dangerous team all year long in Region 16 and once we get to the state tournament. They're just going to keep that way. Starting into our Power 5, at the 5 spot this week, we have the Kanab Cowboys, the traveling circus, we call them.
We joke. Yeah, we've joked. We have a soft spot for the Kanab Cowboys. I actually was trading some texts with Coach Glazier on Friday night. They played they played Parowan this week, and there was no answer for Brock Felder. I mean, 37 points in a high school game. He was phenomenal. They've almost moved him like to a 3 spot. So he's out on the perimeter now where, I don't know, they move Brock around a lot, but he's shooting 3, so he hits 5 threes. And then when he elevates, there's no defense for Brock. But as far as going back to Kanab, I think they're at a critical point right now. We had them at number 1 preseason. Start the preseason. They have all the tools. They've got Case and Janes. They got Cornell. They got Logan Little. They've got Orton. They've got
Brown, Houston,
Cal Glover.
They have all the pieces there to do it, and at times they've looked really good, and this week they didn't look really good. And so I think you're gonna have to see something out of Kanab this week, and they have no time to have off because I believe the Rams come to town on Tuesday.
Yeah, and I don't know if you remember the game last year when South went to Kanab. Emilio Miramontes somehow finds a 4-point play off the front of the rim on a free throw.
Yeah. So I think right now it's gut check time for the Cowboys. They're 10-3, so obviously they're still going to stay up in the RPI. But as our rankings go here in the Power 5, we're talking about who's the hottest team right now. I don't know that Coach Glazier would want to play a playoff game today, but this week is going to say a lot about the Cowboys.
Agreed. The 4th spot, who you got, Andy?
The Parowan Rams.
We've had Parowan in the Power 5. We've had them as a dark horse. We've had them completely out of it, and that's Parowan Rams.
Yeah,
that was their trajectory last year. It was up and down, and there was a stretch last year where they were absolutely on fire. Maybe this is their run this year. Parowan thus far.
Well, I mean, look, Brock Felder is the most unstoppable player in 2A,
100%.
Right? There's no doubt about it. His size, his skill set, because he can step out and shoot. Mm-hmm. I'd like to see him just go to work on the block and dominate teams inside. But yeah, he can step out and shoot. But they have been weird. I did the North Summit Parowan game, right? Who would have seen North Summit beating Parowan that day?
Yeah,
and they did.
Yeah,
and so they have certainly been an up and down team. But that is Cash Mortensen at point guard for them, a sophomore. I mean, he looks really good. I like what we've seen so far from Cash. But it comes down to what can Brock Felder do, and how do you stop him?
Yeah, and I think one of the other big pieces that have kind of came on board this year. Obviously, you have Brock, but then you throw in Luke Millett. So you got 2 guys that are legit 6'6", 6'7" down in the blocks. Millett's been playing much better. So you throw those guys in there, they present matchups to anybody in 2A right now. And when their guard line's playing well, like against Kanab, they just came out and they just blitzed them. And so Parowan, we jokingly last year said they were kind of like a cheat grass fire, like they just went fire fast, and then they just kind of fizzled out. It'll be interesting to see this week. They've got Enterprise at home, and then they play San Juan on the road. So they've got a big test on Tuesday to see how they match up against Enterprise with the bigs against the bigs. And you're going to see
that'll be a good matchup.
See the 2 big guys for Enterprise match up against the 2 big guys for Parowan.
2 bigger guys.
Yeah, 2 bigger guys, and to see how that matchup really takes place and see if Parowan can keep that momentum going. But right now, Parowan moves up into our 4th spot.
So they're standing at 6-6, just coming off 2 huge wins this week against Beaver and Kanab. 3rd spot.
South Sevier Rams. We kind of toyed around this. South Sevier was our number 1 team last week. Obviously, we know what happened in that Enterprise game. They go down to Beaver. It seemed like they struggled at times getting things going against Beaver. I don't know if it had anything to do with the loss or anything else, but I know Miramontes, they held him to 7 points.
He didn't start that game. He's got the hand issue.
Yep. And that's why it kind of goes back. We got some guys that are banged up. I know Barney's banged up. A couple guys got some ankle issues. But obviously the South Severe Rams are still as deadly as ever. They, like we talked about, they got beat at Enterprise. They turned around, beat Beaver. And then yesterday, the 66-52 win against San Juan. Tibbs back in line, has 25. This week, they play that away game at Kanab. I think that's a big game for both of those teams. I think it's a big game for South Severe to really come back out it's going to be a hostile environment down there in Kanab. And for Kanab, it's going to be interesting to see how do they handle that too. I think those guys kind of match up pretty well. They're still going to have to deal with Kaysen James, but Kaysen's been playing. He's been shooting a lot more threes this year than he has. See if Cornell can get going and see how the rest of those guys get going. But we have South Severe at the 3 spot this week.
Just out of curiosity, I did see in the Enterprise South Severe game, Riley Barney hit a baseline jumper early in the game, and he was grabbing at his hip, and I don't think he played after that.
He didn't play much.
He didn't play much in the game after that.
And I was talking to some of the coaches today. I don't think he played at all against San Juan, and dealing with some hip issues. So
that'll shut you down.
Yeah,
if your motor doesn't go on, then
that's right.
And he's a motor guy.
He is a motor guy.
So South Severe coming to the 3 spot. New territory for the Millard Eagles at the 2 spot.
Yeah, talk about the Millard Eagles. You were over there on Friday night.
I did. I saw the Millard Eagles. Millard, we said this, Millard plays with a lot of enthusiasm. They play a great style of basketball, free-flowing. They have 2 dynamic players, Hunter Rhodes, Brant Stevens. Both of them are very dynamic scorers, but both can be very unselfish at times too. They love to get their other players involved. And really their games this week were no doubters. They beat North Severe going away in 71-55. Did you get that game?
That was actually a closer game than the final score.
Tell us a little bit about that.
North Severe really gave them a heck of a game. I think I did the game with Dennis, and he kept talking about how plucky this North Severe team was because they just wouldn't go away. Yeah. And so they weren't allowing Millard to pull away, and Millard finally did late in that game. But it was a 6-8 point game almost the whole time. And so North Severe really played them pretty well. Then there was just some moments, and the defense of Brant Stevens is just incredible, right? I mean, I love the scoring of Hunter, and Brant can score, but Brant's defense is so fun to watch. And his defense, I think, ultimately is what helped them pull away. He got some key steals, and then him and Hunter play so well together that he gets a steal, and Hunter's already 20 feet down the floor ready for an easy layup. and so those two work together so well. But it was a lot closer game than I think than maybe even I expected it to be, because North Severe put up a good fight against them. They just couldn't quite pull off the upset.
Coach Shepard will like to hear that his team put up a good fight. Yeah. And that will be North Severe's struggle is scoring. But Millard, my takeaway from the game of the other night against Gunnison is Millard's defensive intensity, their hands in passing lanes, their deflections, and the runouts they got from those is similar. Reminded me of a Manti team years past when they were really putting a lot of heat on teams, extended heat, and man, like every pass would get deflected. And you were correct. Hunter gets a deflection or Brant gets a deflection, the other guy is gone, and it's just chucked down, and it's just easy points. So they had so many easy points against Gunnison. Off their defense, this game was a no-doubter. It got into the high 30s in the third quarter, and Coach Rhodes pulled the dogs off. It ended up being 73-50. But right now, Millard offensively is clicking well. Both Stevens and Rhodes had 20+. They've both been scoring really well, shooting the ball well. So to me right now, Millard is playing where Coach Rhodes wanted them to be at this point. Yeah. Are they at the top of their game? No, I think they still got more to go. But his preseason has put them right here. And going into region, they're playing exceptionally well.
All right.
Any surprise on our number 1 team? No, I don't think so. Who do you got tonight on the number 1 team?
Well, it's got to be Enterprise.
Enterprise, yeah. The Enterprise Wolves. We started as we started this season. We had Enterprise down about 4. There was still some unknowns. We knew Brady was coming back, obviously running the point. We knew Dax Hunt was coming back. We knew Austin Thomas. Beyond that, we weren't quite sure where the holes, and we kept hearing rumors. Then they got this post player. I'm like, who's this post player?
I asked Bud. I said, Bud. So tell me, who's your post this year? Because you know one's coming. They always have one in the works. Yes. And Bud, Bud's form, he loves to downplay what he's got. He's always gonna talk softly, but he has got another team that's going to make another run. Yeah. No doubt about it.
And I think the one thing that even surprised me a little bit, even as much as we follow him, I was surprised at the height the Enterprise still has this year. You know, last year they lost Adams, they lost Ramos, so two big guys playing the 4 and 5 spots. And I thought, okay, who's going to fill those roles? It was clear Austin Thomas he played big boy basketball the other night, and Whitman as a sophomore against a very, very good Sal Sevier team stepped up. You know what you're going to get out of Brady Crouch, right? The guy, I think he gets unfazed. He didn't shoot as well, I know, and talked to him after the game. He didn't shoot threes as well as he'd like. But I know that one thing he's really focused on this year is his free throw shooting and then getting the paint. The elevation that he can get when he gets inside the paint is just uncanny. I swear he's 3 feet off the ground. Yeah. For a little guy out there, very impressive. I think Ty Staley played well. Dax Hunt.
You're double for Staley. I mean,
yeah. And so I think those guys, the challenge this season, I think will be with their depth. Randall comes off the bench. Segmiller will come in. But the guys are very disciplined in what they do. And I've just talked to them a little bit. I know they won Sal Sevier on Tuesday, obviously. Then they went to San Juan, had a 60-46 game on Friday night. Wasn't the cleanest game in the world. You never know when you get over to Blanding. Sounded like the officiating was a little suspect at times for both teams. It was a game that could just never really get going. A lot of transition back and forth, but it wasn't a lot of momentum. Enterprise pulls away from that game, 60-46, and then last night they just blew out Grand, 93-70.
Coach Randall said that's the best shooting they've had all season.
Yeah. The feedback were on fire. They were just they were up 30-10 at the end of the first quarter. So I think Enterprise still has just one more overdrive gear in them. I think they're getting there. I think that these younger guys are still kind of figuring out how to play. Dax Hunt and Austin Thomas and Brady obviously had a lot of minutes last year, but Tice Staley's getting more minutes this year, and then obviously adding Whitman in there and Randall coming off the bench. I'm excited to see what they're going to do. They got a big week. Parowan, they've got to go to Parowan, and then they're at home with Beaver this week. So be interesting to see what they do, but I think Coach Randall's got his team exactly where he wants them.
Any additional thoughts on Enterprise? Well, you've seen them a lot.
They're good. They're a heck of a team, no doubt about it. I think the biggest key is that 3 tough games 3 days in a row when you have a 6 or 7 man rotation. That's the challenge. Right? That's you mentioned Manti. They keep running 10, 11, 12, 13 guys at you. Makes it a little easier to play 3 tough games in a row at the state tournament, and I think that's going to be a key and how well, what kind of shape they're in. Physically, how healthy are they when that comes state tournament time?
Mm-hmm. One thing that I'm looking forward to on Enterprise, obviously they can replicate playing in the post, but there's other teams in Region 19 that can match up with the height in the post. So to me, what I'm looking to see is where the additional scoring is going to come from. Is shooting the 3, obviously that's going to stretch things, and when teams make threes, it's a beautiful thing. So to see where the additional scoring is going to come from out of the post, because Parowan can defend him in the post, and Kanab can defend him in the post. So how those things play out going forward for Enterprise is going to be interesting to see. But just to wrap up our Power 5, Enterprise 1, Millard 2, Sal Sevier 3, Parowan 4, Kanab 5. Our 2 dark horses to keep an eye on, Duchesne and American Heritage. Happy note, Duchesne will be in town this week.
They will be.
So we'll get a good close look at them again.
Yeah, and just to talk about our hometown Gunnison Bulldogs for a minute, maybe we'll say a homer alert here. We always like to say that. I don't want to say it's a must-win game for Gunnison, but I think it's a must-win game for Gunnison this week against Duchesne. I think they're at that point in their season where they had a great game against North Summit. Big win there. They took it on the chin against Millard. They have got to bounce back this week.
Also, in addition to that, then you've got North Sevier right following that on Friday. Gunnison's banged up right now. So this is going to be a telling week for the Bulldogs.
A big test. So just to contrast what we talk at the Power 5, a quick look at the RPI. We kind of have a love-hate relationship with the RPI, but it is what it is. It was interesting when Devin was on here and we said, how much do you think about the RPI? And he's like, I don't.
You can't, right? I
Yeah,
mean, initially, you needed to try to figure
Yeah.
things out, but once you realize it doesn't matter,
Yeah.
it is what it is.
So a quick look at the RPI as of this morning. Enterprise number 1, South Sevier 2, Kanab 3, Millard 4. This is where I think American Heritage number 5. So I think this is where you have to have a little bit of that gut check. Last year when Roland Hall was top 5, people kept asking us, is Roland Hall real? Is Roland Hall real? And we said, Roland Hall's real. You know, we'd talked to Coach Alvidrez, we've seen him, and you saw what they did to South Sevier last year. I mean, barring Sam Adams getting hurt last year, Sam Andrews getting hurt last year, I'm not so sure they're not playing on Saturday for a state championship. They were close.
Yes.
You never know.
So you said American Heritage is a 5 spot?
American Heritage is a 5 spot. Given where they're at right now in region, I don't see them dropping too far down just because they're going to win a bunch of games.
Absolutely. So they're going to stay up there.
Here's one of the biggest movers of the week. Number 6 was Parowan.
Yes, they bounced
Parowan's
big time.
been in the 8 to 10 to 11 range for a while. They bounce up to number 6. That's huge for them. Duchesne 7, Waterford number 8. I don't know. We don't know anything
they really
about
made a
Waterford.
big jump. Wow.
So that's another one to kind of gut check to see. These northern teams we don't see. Number 9 is our Gunnison Valley Bulldogs, and wrapping up APA West Valley, who we have seen at the 10 spot. They're a tough team at times. I did see they dropped a game to Roland Hall.
Yes, they did.
Gunnison played Roland Hall earlier in the season. Looks like they've made some personnel changes on their team.
Must have. That's a big win for them over at West Valley.
Kai Dowdle is probably one of the best 3-point shooters in 2A. The guy can light it up. So that's kind of the wrap up of the RPI. It's going to be interesting now as we get into the heat of region play. You know, a lot of these guys are kind of settling in. Enterprise has quite a lead. You're talking about, 0.76 is their rating in RPI, and South Sevier is 0.70. You get to this point in the season trying to make that up unless one team really goes on a run. Gets pretty tough, like San Juan last year. It's just they were so far ahead of everybody. But that
Coach Randall wasn't real happy though when Miller jumped Enterprise that week. It got dark.
Yes,
yes. He was not happy, and that's my as a segue. That's my one negative thing about the RPI that I would say to the UHSAA. If it's truly transparent, don't take it down.
Don't go dark. Yep.
People aren't gaming the system. They're not doing anything with it. Don't go dark. If you want to do your reveal, do your reveal. But all it does is make people question the system.
Yep.
So, well, that's a wrap up of the Power 5. We appreciate you being on here with the Power 5 tonight. It's nice to have an extra voice to really
add some context and add some additional stuff to it.
Really,
well, I'm glad to be here. I appreciate you guys
really
asking
knows
me.
what's going on. Yeah, this
is our biggest shakeup in the Power 5. Once we start having head-to-head matchups, that's when things really start rolling. So,
yeah,
it's been a good week.
It's been a very good week. Well, as we get ready to wrap up tonight, we're going to do our GTELCO wrap up. I can't talk tonight. Sometimes you ever get tongue-tied on the radio?
Robert never.
Yes.
Never gets tongue-tied. He can just roll
Too
with
often.
the best of them.
So this segment is sponsored by Lightbush Broadband, by GTELCO, the Sanders family. They've been providing telephone service in the Gunnison Valley for over 100 years and now providing the fastest, most reliable internet as well. Usually gives us the time to give the Vikings update. My 12-year-old son, is a Vikings fan. Let's just say there was some weeping and wailing at our house this afternoon.
The Sanders are big Vikings
They're
fans.
big
That's
Vikings.
our
They
Viking
love
segment.
the Cubs, the Brewers, and the Vikings. So every week we give a Vikings
You can't
update.
like the Cubs and the Brewers.
Well, one son, Max. Max is the Brewers guy.
Yeah, and then the rest of them, Christian and Tim, they're Cubs guys. So the Vikings got beat today. My son has had enough of Kirk Cousins. He's like, he's got the best wide receiving group in the NFL and can't throw to
What
him.
about the defense giving up that kind of points?
The Vikings did not. They're like the worst 10-3 team or 10-4 team in the NFL. Anyway, they took it on the chin. So, wrap up for tonight. Last thoughts.
My thoughts are Region 16 going forward. Millard is playing exceptionally well. They're the favorites in the region. I'm curious to see what team in Region 16 can make a run at Millard. That's Region 19. I think is going to play. That's going to be a slugfest in and of itself. But I want to see who's going to challenge Millard. That's what I want to look forward to. And the best look is to see how Duchesne and Gunnison play on Wednesday. because I think Duchesne, if they keep rolling, Duchesne's going to be the best threat for Millard. Against Millard, excuse me. Best threat against Millard.
Yeah. Any final thoughts for tonight?
No, I think I think he's spot on. I know Coach Hoops feels confident going up against Millard in the games this season. Feels like they've got the team that can beat them, and should be some fun matchups coming up in Region 16, Region 19. As you said, every night is loaded with great matchups, and released every Tuesday and Thursday night instead of Wednesdays and Fridays. But yeah, there's some fun games, some fun teams, some fun players and coaches to watch and see that some of the chess matches that take place with the coaches.
Yeah. For me, I'm sporting my Parowan hat tonight.
I was going to call you out on your Parowan hat tonight. That it looks very nice.
So I'm most interested this week to see if the Rams can keep it going. If they do, I think they can really. Not that they play spoiler in Region 19, but I think it's somebody that they were not quite sure. We jokingly say Parowan is in Brock we trust is kind of their motto, right? But now all of a sudden they've got this supporting cast that puts Mortensen and Millett and some of these guys. They've got a big week this week. I'm interested to see how they handle Enterprise. The other thing I'm looking at is the Kanab South Severe game. You got a kind of a banged up South Severe team going into Kanab who's got three tires off the road and they're trying to decide if they can keep it on. I know Coach Glazer. I know that this is a huge game for them. Coach Christensen, this is a huge game for them as well. I think this is going to say a lot about who's going to go out and really challenge Enterprise. And again, I'm interested to see what Parowan can do against Enterprise. Can Bud somehow figure out what to do with Felder? Because Felder is going to get his points. Do they do something there? And I don't know. But
the matchups in Region 19 are so awesome.
There's so many things.
Great coaching and just great players down there. The matchups are just phenomenal, especially once you go. The first game is the feeling out period, and then what adjustments gets made. That's what I love to see from the coaching angle.
Yeah,
there won't be an undefeated team in Region 19. Right?
No,
I mean, it's too tough to go through that without a loss.
Absolutely, yeah.
My other parting thought is I wanted to thank you personally for letting me put the headset on and call some games.
No, you're doing great.
I've had an absolute blast, except for my pregame and the Gunnison North Summit game.
That's Rhett's fault.
I blame that on him. Threw me under the bus big time, but I've had an absolute blast. I want to personally thank you for that.
No,
it's been a lot of fun.
It.
It's hard. It's been hard for me to go to games because I can't sit in the parent section. So I just go off on my own place somewhere just to watch the game. So this has given me a way to enjoy the games again.
And headset makes so you can't hear the parents.
Bingo. So anyway, I appreciate that. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and thank you so much. We mentioned this. Thank you so much for coming on. As we do this, we're again, we try to reach out. And we were texting a couple weeks ago, and we're like, who could we get? We had Devin came on, and by far the best reception we've had of our podcast in a year and a half. I mean, it just blew up. And we're like, all right, who's next now? I mean, you go from Devin, it's like who's
I can't compare to Devin.
No,
but your reach and influence in
absolutely
in two-way, which we focused on. Your reach and coverage is you are far beyond anybody covering, and your knowledge and the reach of what you do. So you were the next one we wanted to go to.
So that's when
I appreciate it.
I texted Benny. I said, why don't we reach out to Robert and see if he'll come on? He's like, that's a great idea. So again, we're trying to expand our message and vision out there, and we thought, who else can we get that has that reach? You do. So we appreciate your generosity for coming on and sharing your expertise. And
he brought his wife with him tonight too. He's real chivalrous gentleman to bring his wife with him.
Yeah. That's right.
Who I didn't know until tonight is from Enterprise.
She knows more than me, so
yeah. So
she educated us on some Enterprise history. So
absolutely. So we appreciate those good folks down there. And also, I want to just quickly mention our sponsors. We throw them up on social media and everything else. We talk about some of them. Obviously, Security National, Redmond Inc., Dixie Power, Barney Trucking, Lightburst Broadband, Crosby Home and Farm down in Kanab, and Snow College Composites program at Snow South. We've kind of expanded.
Chad Avery actually in there.
Good old Chad.
Yeah, he
love Chad.
He makes sure we reached out to them and he said, hey, make sure it's Snow College Composites. So fantastic sponsors. They've all been exceptionally good to us and helped us really get to where we are. We're always looking to expand that, but we appreciate everything they do to keep us on air and keep us going all the time.
Great people.
Yep. Well, we appreciate you again being with us tonight and sharing your knowledge and being here with us. So for the fourth row, for the coach, Benny Hill, for Robert Lovell, the voice of Mid-Utah Radio, I'm Andy Hill, your host, and we're out.
Thank you for spending your time with the Fourth Row. For more information, check out our website at fourthrowmedia.com or send us a message through any of our social media channels.